Welcome back, my dear travelers. Tonight, we step softly into the ancient woods of Middle-earth, where time moves like wind through the trees, and silence holds the memory of ages. This is the tale of Legolas, son of Thranduil, prince of the woodland realm, an elf whose journey spanned forests and mountains, rivers and ruins, from the deep shade of Mirkwood to the white shores of the west. But this is not a tale of war or glory. Instead, it is a quiet reflection, a gentle walk beside one who moved lightly through the world, leaving no trace but memory and melody. With every footfall, we drift deeper into calm, through leafy realms and starlit halls, through still valleys and fading songs. Before we continue, I want you, my lovely listeners, to comment down below where you're from and what time it currently is. So settle in, breathe softly, and let the hush of elven lands guide your dreams. The road is long, but tonight we need only follow it in peace. In the far northeastern reaches of Middle-earth, where the tall trees of greenwood the great once flourished unbroken, the forest had grown dim. It was a place of tangled roots, shadowed paths, and watchful silence. Long had the woods darkened under the creeping shadow of Dol Guldur, and so it came to be known in later days as Mirkwood. Yet even beneath the brooding canopy, a realm endured, a haven of light amidst the gloom. Here stood the kingdom of Thranduil, the Elven king, son of Orifer, and father to Legolas. It was not a land of open courts or shining towers, but one shaped by the forest itself. Beneath ancient oaks and beeches, the woodland realm lay hidden, its halls carved deep into the rock of northern hills, warded by magic and secrecy. Lanterns glowed like starlight from the trees, and elves moved soundlessly along winding branches, ever watchful. Legolas grew amid this stillness, shaped by the ways of his people. He was of Sindarin descent, though his realm was largely sylvan, elves of the wood, quiet and attuned to the whisper of leaves. He did not dwell in idle luxury, for the world beyond the forest had turned restless. Strange creatures stirred in the dark. Spiders of monstrous size crept down from the mountains of Mirkwood. Orcs, too, roamed with increasing boldness. Though the halls of his father remained untouched, they were not unguarded. As a prince, Legolas bore no crown, nor did he seek one. His path was not of command, but of vigilance. He ranged often through the woods, bow in hand, footfall light upon the moss. Few in Middle-earth could match the sharpness of his sight or the silence of his tread. To walk beside him was to hear nothing but the wind and the call of distant birds. To glimpse him was to doubt whether he had ever been there at all. Though peril loomed, the elves endured with dignity. In the deepest parts of the forest, where green light filtered through the canopy and time seemed to hang suspended, they sang in soft voices, songs of stars and starlight, of ancient shores and long-lost kin. Legolas knew these songs well, and though he seldom joined in them openly, their rhythms moved within him, quiet and constant. Life in the woodland realm was measured not by years but by seasons. The elves planted no fields, built no roads. They moved with the turning of the earth, harvesting what was needed, leaving no scars. Spring came with the bloom of white flowers upon the forest floor. Summer was golden and dappled, alive with birdsong. In autumn, the trees shed their leaves in great carpets of amber and crimson. And in winter, snow clung to the branches in still beauty. It was a cycle unbroken by time or war, until the darkness from the south deepened. By the time the Third Age neared its end, the shadow in Dol Guldur had returned, stronger than before. The watch on the borders was constant. Legolas took his place among the sentinels, often far from the safety of his father's halls. He passed beneath dark boughs, along paths known only to the elves, ever alert for signs of corruption. Though danger was near, he did not fear it. He had long been tempered by the weight of his people's vigilance. Even so, there were places in Mirkwood where the darkness had not yet reached, where pools of clear water still reflected the stars, and the scent of pine lingered in the air. In those spaces, Legolas found moments of quiet, brief but undisturbed. Sometimes he would pause to listen to the trees, whose age surpassed even his own. Their branches creaked in slow memory, murmuring of elder days, of things long buried beneath moss and root. Though Legolas rarely spoke of his thoughts, he understood the weight that lingered over his people. The woodland realm had once been part of a greater whole, of Greenwood the Great, of the ancient elven presence in Middle-earth. That memory had not faded, even as the forest narrowed under siege. Even as the light dimmed, he walked as one who still remembered what the woods had been. And so it was that when word came of a council to be held in Rivendell, Legolas was chosen as his father's emissary. It was not his first time beyond the forest, but it marked a turning point. The path ahead would not return him to the simple watchfulness of home. He would leave behind the deep halls of stone and the rustling paths of Mirkwood. He would walk roads shaped by ancient doom and rising hope. Yet for now, he remained among the trees, moving like moonlight across the forest floor. The birds called above, and the wind stirred the branches in gentle rhythm. The darkness was near, yes, but not yet. There was still beauty here, still silence, still memory. And in that stillness walked the prince of the woodland realm, bow slung across his back, eyes set not on himself, but on the world that might yet be preserved. The hush of Mirkwood fell behind him. Legolas crossed the forests, the wide lands of Rivanion, and finally the edges of the misty mountains with the swift endurance of his kind. Though the journey was long, he travelled lightly, as elves do, his purpose fixed. Rivendell awaited. Nestled in a hidden valley beyond the foothills, Imladris, known to men as Rivendell, was not merely a refuge, but a place of deep memory. The House of Elrond stood as one of the last bastions of ancient wisdom, where the High Elves still lingered, and the tongues of old ages were spoken by starlight. It was here that the wise had gathered to face the rising shadow once more. Legolas arrived bearing tidings from his father, Thrandur, who had recently taken a prisoner within his halls. Gollum, the pitiful creature once twisted by the One Ring. But Gollum had escaped, aided by unknown hands. This loss had troubled the woodland elves deeply, and now the matter would be weighed by others with more knowledge of the ring's peril. Elrond's house was filled with voices and footsteps in those days. Lords and messengers from distant lands had come, men of Gondor, dwarves from Erebor, and even one from the Shire. There was a sense in Rivendell that time itself was bending, that events long foretold had begun to unfold. Yet within its gardens and halls, the air remained calm, untouched by haste. Legolas wandered beneath trees that bore no shadow, beside waters that sang softly over smooth stone. The valley was a cradle of memory, its silence not empty, but full of thought. He did not speak often, nor did he seek counsel, but he observed. And in observing, he listened to the deeper currents of what was being said and what was not. When the council was called, he sat quietly among the gathered there. There were voices raised, tales recounted of ancient betrayal and new danger. The ring was brought forth, and its power stirred unease, even among those hardened by long years. Elrond presided with patience, allowing the truth to unfold as each spoke in turn. Legolas gave his message plainly. The creature Gollum had escaped their watch. Though they had shown care and compassion, guarding him in the hope that he might reveal what he knew, it had availed little. This news deepened the gravity of the council's purpose, for it meant that Sauron's servants had moved swiftly and with reach. As the discussions turned to the fate of the ring, Legolas listened still. He had not come seeking burden or command, but when the matter of a fellowship arose, those who would accompany the ring-bearer into the lands of shadow, he did not hesitate to step forward. It was not pride nor duty to his father that moved him, but something quieter, the knowledge that silence was no longer enough. The world had changed. Thus he became one of 9, an elf among a dwarf, men, a wizard, and hobbits. Their unity would be tested, their purpose secret, but the choice was made, and there was no turning from it. Before their departure, time passed gently in Rivendell. The company rested, gathering strength for what lay ahead. Legolas spent his final evenings beneath the stars, walking paths where ancient stone met flowering vine. The sounds of the valley, song, water, and wind, would linger in his memory long after. On the morning of their leaving, the valley was still. The fellowship gathered at the gate, each prepared in quiet ways. Elrond stood beside them, and though his voice was soft, it carried the weight of years beyond reckoning. The sky was pale with winter light as they passed out of Rivendell, taking the first steps of a longer road. Legolas did not look back. The trees of Mirkwood were far behind, and the halls of Imladris would not see him again for many years, if ever. His gaze was forward, toward mountains yet to cross, toward danger not yet faced. And so the Elven prince stepped into the next age of the world, not as a messenger, but as a companion on a path that led beyond the reach of any forest. The Fellowship moved like a shadow across the eastern lands, their footsteps light or heavy according to their kind. Over snow, stone, and sodden trail, they pressed on in silence more often than speech. 9 companions, yet among them, Legolas alone seemed untouched by weariness or cold. Where others sank into the snow or stumbled over rocks, he passed lightly, barely marking the earth beneath him. Their path first led through the hills of Eriador, winding past ruins of ancient Arna and quiet groves long forgotten. Legolas spoke little, but remained ever watchful. He noted the signs of older ages, the worn stones once set by men now faded into moss and root. Though he had not walked these lands before, the sorrow that clung to them was familiar, echoing the fading song of his own forested home. The first great test came upon the slopes of Caradhras. The Redhorn Pass rose steep and harsh beneath a steel sky, blanketed in deepening snow. Wind howled down the ridges, and blizzards pressed hard against their progress. While the hobbits and even Aragorn labored to push forward, Legolas seemed immune to the storm's weight. His voice was calm as he walked atop the snow, leaving no trace behind. He did not boast, nor did he offer command, but his presence reminded the others that not all hope was lost to the storm. When at last they turned aside from the mountain's fury, it was not toward open land that they were led, but into darkness. Moria lay ahead, Khazad-dûm, the ancient realm of dwarves, now long fallen to shadow. Legolas hesitated. He had no love for such places, carved deep into stone and sealed from sun or sky. The memory of dwarves and elves was a long one, marked with tension and mistrust. Yet he did not voice complaint. He understood necessity. Within the black halls of Moria, time itself felt strangled. The echo of each footstep lingered too long, and the silence held the threat of waking things best left to sleep. Legolas was ever alert, his elven senses stretched thin through the dark. He saw more than the others in the dimness, fine cracks in the stone, ancient carvings worn with grief, the long silence of a proud people who no longer sang in these halls. In the chamber of Mazarbel, where Balin's tomb lay cold and still, Legolas stood in silence beside Gimli and did not speak. Whatever lay between their peoples, he did not mock grief. When the drums began to beat in the deep, it was Legolas who loosed the first arrow, swift and unerring. It struck true, and others followed. His bow sang sharply in the blackness, his movements swift and fluid, more a rhythm than a fight. And then came the bridge of Khazad-dûm. As the fellowship fled, the falling stones and the fire behind them, Legolas moved as a streak of light, his arrows falling like hail upon the enemy, buying precious moments as Gandalf stood against the Balrog. When the wizard fell into shadow, none could speak. The silence that followed was not the hush of forest or snowfall. It was the silence of loss. Beyond Moria's eastern gate, they emerged into Dimril Dale. There, beside the waters of the Mirror Mere, Legolas stood for a long time. He did not mourn in words, but his gaze lingered on the still water, reflecting the sky above. The company rested, and the grief in their hearts was softened only by the quiet presence of the land. Snow glistened on the slopes, and the wind moved gently through the pines. The dead were not forgotten, but the living still had paths to tread. From the mountains they turned south, toward the Golden Wood. Legolas had heard tales of Lothlorien, of the lady who ruled within, of trees older than reckoning, of beauty untouched by the decay of the world. Yet, when they passed beneath the Malarn trees, he found the reality deeper than song. The forest glowed with a quiet light, golden leaves rustling even without wind. The air was still, but not stale. It was filled with presence, as if the forest breathed. The elves of Lorien welcomed the fellowship with caution, but they did not turn them away. Legolas found comfort in the woods, among kin who had never left the memory of the elder days. He walked often alone beneath the trees, listening to the gentle cadence of Lorien's song, which ran not through voice, but through bark, branch, and root. He stood beside Galadriel when she spoke, not as a prince or emissary, but as one who recognized the weight she bore. He did not ask for gifts, but was given one all the same. A bow of the Galadrim, strung with elven hair, stronger than any he had wielded before. No flourish marked the gift, only a quiet nod, and a glance exchanged that carried the weight of ages. When the fellowship departed, the boats carried them down the Anduin. Legolas sat quietly at the bow, eyes searching the riverbanks. The wind stirred his hair, and the scent of water and leaf drifted on the air. Lothlorien faded behind them, its song still echoing faintly in his thoughts. Though Gandalf was gone, and the road ahead uncertain, there was a steadiness in him. The world was changing, he had known it since Rivendell, but he also knew that even amid ruin, beauty endured. And so Legolas, the prince of the woodland realm, moved on. Silent, swift, and ever watchful, through a world poised between memory and the edge of something greater. The river bore them southward, its currents swift and sure beneath the grey sky. As they drifted along the Anduin, silence became a companion once more. The wooded hills gave way to craggy outcrops and rising cliffs, and the land seemed to hold its breath. Legolas sat alert in the forward boat, his sharp eyes scanning both shore and horizon. Though he said little, his vigilance never waned. The Fellowship passed through lands growing wilder by the mile. Shadows lengthened beneath the trees, and the great Argonath loomed ahead. Twin kings of forgotten Numenor, hewn in stone, standing sentinel above the river. As their boats slipped between the towering statues, Legolas regarded them with quiet awe. Their grandeur spoke of a time long past, when the line of Elendil ruled with wisdom and strength. The wind that passed between the silent kings carried no threat, only the memory of power now faded. After the falls of Rhoros, the Fellowship's path splintered. The attack of the Uruk-hai brought ruin to their camp and sorrow to their hearts. Boromir fell in battle, his horn silenced in the wild, and Merry and Pippin were taken. There was no time for grief. Aragorn chose pursuit, and without question Legolas followed. He did not linger by the fallen or debate their course. His loyalty was quiet and unspoken, yet firm as ironwood. Across the plains of Rohan they ran, 3 hunters, swift and tireless. Legolas matched Aragorn's stride, though the pace would have broken lesser men. His elven endurance bore him far across the Riddermark's rolling grasslands. Where others saw mere plains, he discerned subtle signs. A bent blade of grass, the imprint of a boot, the faint scent of orcs carried on the wind. Each clue stitched together the path of their quarry. In those days of pursuit, Legolas saw the world open beyond his woodland home. The wide skies of Rohan, the endless fields, the shifting play of light on tall grasses. These were lands that sang a different song, one of wind and horizon, not of canopy and root. And though he had spent centuries beneath trees, he did not find the open land foreign. There was freedom in it, and silence of a different kind. When they encountered the riders of Rohan, Legolas stood beside Aragorn and Gimli without fear. Though Eomer and his men were wary, the elf did not shrink before them. His presence was like starlight on a cold night, distant, clear, and quietly resolute. Though words passed swiftly between Aragorn and Eomer, Legolas remained still, his hand never far from his bow, yet his eyes calm. There was no need for bluster. The wind carried his confidence. After learning that the riders had seen no hobbits, only orcs slain and burned, the 3 companions turned their steps toward Fangorn Forest. The woods rose strange and ancient before them, darker than any in Rohan, older than even the depths of Mirkwood. There was an uncanny stillness to them, not the watchful silence of elves, but something deeper, slower, more rooted in the bones of the earth. Legolas stepped beneath Fangorn's eaves with reverence. Though the forest was not elven, He felt in it a presence that stirred the memory of the world's earliest days. The trees seemed not merely alive, but aware, listening, even breathing. Every creak of limb, every groan of bark carried weight. It was not a place to trespass carelessly. Within those woods, they encountered one older still, Treebeard, the eldest of the ants. Legolas beheld him with quiet awe, for he had never seen one of the Onodream, though he had heard tales in song. Treebeard's speech was slow and sonorous, like the rustle of great leaves in windless air. Legolas listened with the patience of his people, and when he spoke, it was with deference. He did not seek to explain the haste of the world beyond the forest, for he knew such things had little weight here. In Fangorn, time stretched. The urgency of the chase softened as the companions came to understand the ancient forest's will. Merry and Pippin had found unlikely safety, and the ants stirred slowly toward war. Legolas spent these days walking among the trees, his senses attuned to their whispers. He sang softly in Elvish as he wandered, songs of starlight, of growing things, of times when forests ruled the land. And there, in the deepening green, his friendship with Gimli began to shift. Though elf and dwarf shared little in culture or form, they had walked through fire and shadow together. Legolas no longer saw only the stubbornness of stone in his companion, but also courage and loyalty, and a certain wisdom hidden beneath gruffness. There was no need for declarations. In quiet moments, their bond grew, rooted in shared purpose, watered by peril. From Fangorn, the road bent again. War moved across the plains. The companions would ride to Edoras, to Helm's Deep, and beyond. But in that forest, where the world's heartbeat slowed and the air hung thick with age, Legolas carried something forward, not only a memory of trees older than song, but the stillness that lived within them. He did not know what lay ahead, only that the world was changing and he would not stand aside. And so, with bow in hand and eyes set toward a horizon ever shifting, he stepped once more into the path ahead, silent, steady, and unwavering. The world did not return to what it had been. Though victory had come and Sauron was cast down, the shadow left its mark. The Fourth Age began not with celebration, but with rebuilding, quiet and slow. Gondor stood once more at the center of the realm of men, and within its white walls, the memory of ancient kings stirred back to life. Legolas stood upon the great stone terraces of Minas Tirith, watching the banners ripple in the high wind. The city had changed, though still crowned in stone and clad in light. It now bore the green and silver of the reunited kingdom, symbols of renewal beneath the returned king. Aragorn, once strider of the wild, now ruled as Elazar. The elf had not remained for ceremony, nor for acclaim, but he walked the courts and corridors of the White City with quiet grace, a companion to the king and a silent watcher of what had been won. There were no longer great battles to fight, no long marches to endure, and so Legolas turned toward a gentler task, the mending of what the war had broken. With the passing of danger came the opportunity to heal, to restore beauty where ruin had taken hold. He did not return to Mirkwood. Instead, he moved east of Anduin to the land of Ithilien. Once a garden of Gondor, Ithilien had withered under the long arm of Mordor's corruption. But the soil remembered. Wildflowers bloomed again along old stone paths, and trees put down roots in places long abandoned. Here, among crumbling ruins and resurgent green, Legolas chose to remain. With elves of his kin, he founded a new settlement, a colony of light and song beneath the eaves of the Ifel Dwarf. No great halls were built, no towers raised. The elves of Ithilien lived lightly, as they had in Greenwood long before. They planted groves, sang to the streams, and restored the silence to places once filled with fear. Birds returned to the woods. The stars, long dimmed by smoke, shone clearly again. Legolas did not speak of his rule, though others called him Lord. He guided rather than commanded, walked rather than presided. He was seen often beneath the boughs of beech and ash, listening to the wind or watching deer pass through the mist. His songs were soft and infrequent, but when they came, they carried far into the leaves. Gondor prospered, and its borders were once again protected not by force alone, but by friendship. The bond between elf and man had long been tested, but now it held firm. Elazar and Legolas met often, one with the burdens of mortality, the other with the stillness of ages behind his eyes. They spoke of memory, of kings and kin, of forests and fading things, and though one would pass beyond the world and the other linger, their bond remained unshaken. Two men who passed through Ithilien, the elves were a wonder. Tall and silent, they moved among the trees as part of the forest itself. Some said they saw lights dancing on the water at twilight, or heard voices singing in a tongue they could not name. Few dared disturb them, but none bore them ill will. The land was better for their presence. And Legolas, though he seemed unchanging, felt the weight of years begin to press inward. Not through age, for elves did not age as men did, but through the slow ache of fading. The sea called to him. He heard it not as a sound, but as a stirring, deep and persistent, like a tide beneath thought. Since Galadriel's gift in Lothlorien, he had felt it faintly. Now, as the fourth age lengthened, it grew stronger. Still, he remained. For the sake of the world he had helped to save, and for those who had shared the burden, he lingered. Ithilien bloomed under his care, becoming once more a land of peace. But he knew, even in the golden hush of summer, that his time upon these shores would not endure forever. He walked at dusk through groves he had planted with his own hands. The leaves rustled softly, and birds sang their evening notes. The wind that came down from the mountains carried the scent of pine and river. These were the final years of elven kind in Middle-earth, years of stillness before the last song. And so, in the gardens of Gondor, beneath trees that now bore silver fruit and gold-tipped leaves, Legolas lived not as prince nor warrior, but as a steward of beauty. He had crossed mountains and rivers, walked in shadow and stood in fire. Now he brought light to fading places. He asked for no memory. He carved no name in stone. But the trees remembered. The stars remembered. And in the quiet heart of Gondor, the last elven colony breathed in peace, for as long as the wind endured. The trees of Athelion whispered always, even in stillness. Their leaves danced gently in windless air, stirred by something more ancient than breeze. In the soft hours of twilight, when the light grew golden and the land held its breath, Legolas would pause in his walk and listen. And beyond the rustle of branches and the murmuring stream, he would hear it, that distant call, faint, persistent, the sea. The longing had stirred within him since Lothlorien, since Galadriel's words and the gift of her bow. To elves, the sea was not merely water or horizon. It was memory and home and the voice of the West. It grew stronger with each passing year, not painful but insistent, a summons not of urgency but of inevitability. He remained for a time, though the call deepened. He watched over Athelion as it blossomed, walked with Elazar in the gardens of the city, and journeyed once more to Aglarand to speak with Gimli beneath the stone arches of the glittering caves. These final days were quieter than those of war, yet no less meaningful. They were years of farewell, though no words marked them as such. But after the passing of Aragorn, Elisarta Ocontar, his friend and king, Legolas could no longer remain. The mortal world had shifted, and he, like all elves, belonged now to a fading echo. It is said that he journeyed west to the shores of Lindon, where Círdan the shipwright once kept the grey ships. And there, upon the sea's edge, Legolas built a vessel with his own hands, slim and silver, shaped by memory and guided by starlight. With him came Gimli, aged but unbowed, the only dwarf ever to sail the straight road. Whether the Valar permitted his passage for his deeds, or for the bond between them, none can say with certainty. But the ship departed, and was seen no more upon the waves. And thus Legolas passed out of Middle-earth, into the west beyond time. He left no trace upon the shore, no farewell spoken in the language of men. Only the trees knew, and the sea. And in their rustling leaves, the sound of the waves has never truly gone silent. And so, Dear traveler, the tale of Legolas comes to a gentle close. From the shadowed paths of Mirkwood to the starlit havens of the west, his journey was one of quiet purpose, shaped not by glory, but by grace. He moved through Middle-earth like a passing wind, light, constant, and never lingering where he was not needed. Though his voice was seldom raised, his presence left behind a lasting stillness, as if the very earth remembered his steps. In the end, he heeded the call that stirs in all elven hearts, the song of the sea, the longing for what lies beyond the circles of the world. And into that undying light he sailed, leaving behind only memory and the peace he helped restore. Rest now, and let his quiet path guide your dreams. Good night, my dear traveler. May starlight lead you gently into sleep.